How's it going, everyone? I'm back with yet another player ranking, and this time I'm looking at my personal top 25 running backs. And just keep in mind, this will be on a PPR basis, so be aware. I'm going to try to make this a 20-25 minute video. We'll see how it goes, and as always, let me know what you guys think so I can make future videos even better. And let's get right into it. At number one, I've got David Johnson. For me, this is pretty clear cut, but let me make the case for Johnson over Le'Veon Bell. There are less question marks with Johnson in terms of his off the field issues and injury issues. At the same time, he's a stud both PPR wise and standard league wise, just as is Le'Veon Bell. But the main thing I like about Johnson is that offensively in Arizona, Palmer is at the back end of his career, so the running game becomes more of a focal point, and there's less weapons in Arizona to some degree, or less elite weapons. So David Johnson has to be more in the mix of that. At number two, like I said, I've got Le'Veon, and the same spiel that I gave for David Johnson pretty much apply word for word to Le'Veon Bell, except that he does have off the field issues, and there are some concerns with his durability, I would say. Also, Martavis Bryant is coming back, so I think that'll be some receptions taken away from Le'Veon Bell. Number three, no surprise, I've got Zeke, and even though he's a sophomore, you saw how dominating he was behind that offensive line, in part largely due to that offensive line in Dallas. But he really figured it out towards the end of the season. Again, a PPR guy at the same time as a dominant rusher additionally. But my main concern here is that there are reports coming out that he will miss maybe 2 games because of his off-the-field issues from last year. We'll see what happens. In my book, that lowers him in ranking of players overall, but not in running backs overall. So he's still my number 3 guy no matter what because of that offensive line. At number 4, I've got maybe the first kind of surprise, and that's Melvin Gordon. I like Gordon because he's still relatively young. Mainly Danny Woodhead is gone, so now he is the feature back. I read a report that Mike Williams got hurt, the rookie that they drafted. He might miss all of the season, so that'll be more receptions for Melvin Gordon. He started getting that knack for finding the end zone last year compared to his rookie year, so I like that. He's a PPR guy as well, and he's young, and I think he'll bounce back from that late season injury he had this year. At number 5, I've got a guy that's pretty similar, LeSean McCoy, except he's a lot more experienced. The thing that I have going against LeSean McCoy is mainly the team he's on, and that's because the Bills are trying to refine their identity. So what I mean is Rex Ryan is gone, and he was a power running guy first offensively. With that gone, and their new head coach, I don't think necessarily LeSean McCoy gets that same workload. I know Gillislee is gone, but they've still got Dixon there. Also, there's some injury concerns with LeSean McCoy. I don't know if he can stay healthy for all of 16 games. We'll see. But you do have to like his potential, especially in PPR. Number 6, I've got Devonta Freeman. And wow, these last 2 years, he has been amazing. But offensively in Atlanta, I would say, and I would feel comfortable saying this, there's no chance that they repeat what they did offensively. They're going to take a step back because they're losing their offensive coordinator, first of all. And on top of that, they played out of their minds last year. That's going to be very hard to sustain and to duplicate. On top of that, keep in mind Devonta Freeman splits some time with Tevin Coleman, and that's a name you're going to hear later on in this list. But he does vulture some of those touches in Atlanta, so you have to keep that in mind. Nonetheless, Freeman is still an excellent option. Number 7, I've got DeMarco Murray, and he had a great year last year, but he's yet another year older. The Titans added some weapons with Decker in their first-round selection at receiver. Also, you got Derrick Henry there, who they invested a high pick on a year ago. We'll see what happens. Maybe it'll be a situation where it motivates Murray even further, or he loses some of those snaps. But there is a great offensive line in Tennessee, and he is an additional PPR threat. So you have to like all those things. Number 8, now it gets to your more standard running back, and that's a guy like Ajayi in Miami. The reason I like him is because there's no questions about it. Miami is trying to be that power running team, so that bodes well for Ajayi. You're probably going to see those high digit touchdowns and those red zone opportunities and those bulk carries in general. The thing that I don't like about Ajayi, maybe not like, but kind of question, is last year he had a great year, finished as one of the top running backs. But keep in mind, a big chunk of his results came in maybe like a 3-game span, and that's something that I'm wary of. I'd rather have a running back that's consistent throughout the season than kind of just explodes for a couple games, and that's how he gets the majority of his points. At number 9, I've got Jordan Howard. The reason I've got him here is offensively, Chicago is a mess. You don't know who's going to be the quarterback there, but that doesn't really matter at the same time. They're in a rebuild, no matter what anyone else is telling you. Jordan Howard is the best player offensively on that team, so in terms of a usage standpoint, you would think that he's the focal point. But other teams are going to know that too, so they're going to stack the box. Maybe not the biggest PPR threat, we'll see with Howard, but in terms of work ethic, in terms of skill, you got to love this kid, because last year starts out as the number 3 guy and then works his way up to the starting back. And that just means he didn't have a full season. Hopefully this year he'll be able to better the numbers he had from 2016, and he'll be a justified top 10 running back when it's all said and done. Now, finishing off my top 10, I've got Marshawn Lynch, beast mode. And hear me out, some people are going to say this is way too high. And I might understand that, but he is playing behind the Oakland offensive line. He'll probably average less than 20 carries a game. We'll see, but that's just because they want him for the playoffs. Even with that said, though, that offense is on the rise up, and it's pretty good already. So he'll have those lanes. He'll have those opportunities. I do think he'll be around 100 yards a game. And most importantly, he'll be that main touchdown threat in the red zone. So I see double-digit touchdowns for Marshawn Lynch in that perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, if he's on any other team offensively, they'll probably be less talented on the offensive line standpoint. So Lynch does not crack my top 10 in that scenario. Moving on, Lamar Miller I have at number 11. And in my opinion, he was one of the biggest duds last year, disappointments running back-wise. They want to give him a big workload, but you saw that kind of take a toll on him because he was nicked up. And that was so frustrating because you invested at a high pick in Lamar Miller. And that's why I hesitated to put him in my top 10. Also, you kind of saw Alfred Blute take some of his carries even when he wasn't hurt. And another thing to add on top of that, I would love Lamar Miller if he was playing in a place where they knew who their quarterback was, but that's not the case. So that's a little bit inconsistent, and I don't know what's going to happen. If Deshaun Watson gets in there earlier, then I think that helps Lamar Miller, because you have that threat of both the quarterback and running back going for a run. Number 12, a guy in my book that's pretty similar, Todd Gurley. I don't think he'll necessarily in the near future duplicate the kind of rookie year that he had. People have his game film on tape now, so we'll see what happens. But Gurley, in terms of potential and in terms of skills, he's a stud. The potential is there. The problem is with the Rams wholeheartedly offensively, because there's question marks with the offensive line, with the receivers, and also with the quarterbacks. Jared Goff didn't look that great. All in all, the Rams just look pretty god-awful last year. And unfortunately, that takes a toll, and it's going to take a toll on Gurley yet again, in my opinion. There's a lot of good teams defensively in that division, so keep an eye out on that. But if somehow things do break for the Rams, where they figure things out offensively, Gurley will be a steal in the draft process. At number 13, I've got Leonard Fournette, and some might say, he's a rookie, you don't want to rank him this high, but the Jags invested a top 5 pick in him, so keep that in mind. They're going to try and justify that. Coughlin likes to have his running game entrenched, so hey, Fournette will get the opportunities, but the main question mark is that offensive line in Jacksonville. If they can somehow figure it out, then Fournette will be a good option. I think definitely will be a red zone threat, definitely will be in the conversation for having double-digit touchdowns, so that is always a plus. Now, we get to a guy that's more PPR-based, well, definitely PPR-based, actually, in Ty Montgomery, because he's the guy that made the switch from receiver to running back, so he's got that history, and Aaron Rodgers definitely likes to take advantage of that. In standard leagues, not nearly as valuable at number 14, probably looking at around the 20 ranking otherwise, so keep that in mind. But he did have that kind of coming out party towards the end of the year, so I like him to continue that with yet another offseason behind him. They did draft, that being Green Bay, 3 running backs in this year's draft, which is just astonishing to me, but all the reports coming out of Green Bay is that Ty Montgomery is the guy, so you have to find at least that encouraging. Number 15, a very similar guy, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Now, the reason I like him at 15 and not higher up is because, for example, Ty Montgomery is playing in the Green Bay offense. McCaffrey is with the Panthers. That's the difference. That offensive line, I've got question marks with in Carolina. However, they will target McCaffrey because they invested a top 10 pick in him, so they'll try and justify that. But nonetheless, Stewart is still there, and he's going to be the main workhorse. Also, no matter what you're hearing, Cam Newton will still get red zone carries, even as a quarterback, because you cannot tell me when you have that weapon and it's 2 yards to get in the end zone, you're not just going to give it to Cam and he's going to leap over guys for an easy touchdown. I don't believe that. So McCaffrey will have those looks taken away from him, but he will be an excellent option PPR-wise because he will get targets, and he'll still get a decent amount of carries. 16, again, yet another similar guy in Mark Ingram. A good PPR threat, but the Saints did add Adrian Peterson, who you would think is going to be the main guy. Also, they added some pieces in the draft in terms of running back. And what I've heard is that maybe Mark Ingram gets phased out a little bit as the third down back, which is a concern because he's losing opportunities. But the thing is, there are so many opportunities in New Orleans offensively because their defense is so just inept, which is frustrating defensively, but amazing if you have anyone on that offense fantasy-wise. 17, I've got Bilal Powell, and a lot of these guys are very similar, so you can kind of switch them in terms of player rankings, but I do like them in terms of the ranges where I have them. So Bilal Powell at 17, he does split time with Forte, but I think as the season goes on, he's going to become the clear-cut guy. And you saw that when he was the guy last year with the Jets, what he did. And what he did was very impressive. But at the same time, this is the Jets, so that kind of is a mark against him. And that's just because the Jets are still in the rebuild phase, and that's pretty apparent. So people are probably going to stack the box against them. We'll see what happens, but Powell is at least a good PPR option, and if they do somehow click on offense, he will be elevated higher than 17. At 18, yet another PPR guy, and that's Spencer Ware with the Chiefs. Now, there's been a lot of reports that he might lose carries to some of the rookies that were brought in, but hey, until that happens, I've got Spencer Ware relatively is a good value guy, and Andy Reid is pretty loyal to his guys, so I like Spencer Ware here. He's a great pass catching running back. He also gets those opportunities in the red zone. You see that from time to time. So as long as he is the main guy, I like him in Kansas City. Number 19. Now this is your traditional running back, and that's Frank Gore. Frank Gore, God, this guy's been in the league what it seems like forever, but he had yet another 1,000-yard season last year, and I think unless barring an injury, he will come close to duplicating that just because the Colts do rely on him as their feature back, and just because they have a good offense, he will get opportunities. So keep that in mind. I like him to maybe have a couple less yards, maybe just because of the wear and tear, but I think he'll come pretty close to duplicating what he had last year. Number 20, I've got Carlos Hyde, and some might say that this is too low, but let me explain. Last year when he was healthy, played very well. So that's always reassuring, but then the injuries started coming, and that's where a lot of my concerns stem from. Also, San Fran, similar situation. They're going to be a bottom 5 team. So I'm not too high on their offensive potential. We'll see what happens. Also, there were a lot of reports coming out prior to the draft that they might be high on a guy like Fournette. I don't know if that was a smokescreen or what, but that just tells me they don't have confidence in Carlos Hyde. So we'll see what happens. Keep an eye out for that. Maybe they're just looking for an excuse to install someone else in that system. 21, I've got a guy that a lot of people are very high on, Joe Mixon. Now, let me say this. If he doesn't have the off-the-field issues going into the draft, this guy is a round 1 pick. But that wasn't the case. Nonetheless, the Bengals, keeping in close with their MO, take a character concern guy, but it is what it is. They're going to have to defend that pick, so I think he will get opportunities. He is going in the draft. He was rated as an elite runner, but also an elite pass catcher. So you have to like that in terms of a PPR standpoint. My biggest concern, however, though, is that he goes not only into contention with another running back for playing time, but with 2 running backs, that being Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. Both basically, he's a combination of both guys, but I don't know if he'll win out that job. If he does, then you're going to get very good value, even if you pick him around the 20 mark. But if he never breaks through and stays behind those guys, he will not be as valuable as I have him listed or as other people do. At 22, I've got Ezekiel Crowell, and now he had a good year in terms of receptions last year, but make no question about it. There's no question about it. Duke Johnson is their reception machine in terms of the running back guy. Also, Crowell did have some games where his performance just jumped in those games and he wasn't consistent in others. So for me, like I've said, that's a concern. But he's the main guy offensively in Cleveland. Who else do you have? He knows the system, so he has that going for him. I like him to get red zone carries when they have a couple yards to go. So I think he's a decent value pick at 22. 23, PPR guy, definitely. Theo Riddick of the Lions. When Abdullah got hurt, he took advantage of that, and owners were rewarded last year. But that probably won't be the case this year with Abdullah back, so temper your expectations. If for some reason there are injuries, he'll be also a great option as a runner, but he is primarily a pass catcher. So I think that the Detroit offense has the potential with Stafford to put up points, and that will definitely benefit Theo Riddick. But he is not the primary guy, so that prevents me from ranking him any higher. 24. I told you this guy's name would come up again, and it is Tevin Coleman. Even though he has a limited role in that offense compared to Devonta Freeman, he put up very nice numbers last year. And a lot of that has to do with just how well, like I said, the Falcons performed offensively. But, hey, just think about this. If for some reason Freeman gets hurt and you've handcuffed him with Coleman, Coleman becomes a top 5 running back. So that's something that I like to think about, handcuffs in these kind of drafts, especially for your top-notch guys. So that's why he appears in my top 25 list. Now, finishing off this list, I've got a guy in Mike Gillislee that's joining the Patriots that's going to try and take over that LeGarrette Blount role. The reason I do like him as a top 25 talent is because the Patriots give chances to all their guys. So Gillislee will have chances, but at the same time, they don't have the same MO, the same game plan to beat you every week. So one week it might be Gillislee getting a high workload, but the other week it might be a offensive barrage with Brady. Another week it might be defensively winning the game. So I don't know. But from what you saw with him in Buffalo, he's definitely talented. He can catch the ball as well. He's a big guy. We'll see what happens. There have been some off-the-field issues with him, but I think he'll straighten up in New England. And I think as the season goes on, he'll become more comfortable and probably become more consistent scoring-wise. So with all that said, this concludes my list. As I said before, let me know what you guys think. Give me a like, subscribe if you want to keep seeing these videos. I'll keep coming out with them. And with that being said, I'll see you then.